Hello and welcome to New Movie Mayhem, brought to you by ScreenMayhem.com. I'm Stephen Saunders. Today we're going to be talking all about It. No, I don't mean a frank discussion about the birds and the bees. I mean the new movie adaptation of Stephen King's epic coming-of-age horror novel, It. As our regular listeners will know, I am usually joined by Matthew Whitaker. However, as it was Matthew's birthday on Friday, he's been excused, and I can only hope is out having a great time somewhere. Happy birthday, Matthew. Instead, keeping me company is Paul Salt, Screen Mayhem's resident film critic and co-host of the wittiest podcast about bad movies out there, One Good Thing. Hello, Paul. How's it going?
Hello. Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Happy to have you on the show.
Oh, happy to be here.
Great. It'd be terrible if you said, I hate being here, I wish I was somewhere else.
Yeah, I always let that slip, but I've been working on it, and I have it written in front of me here, happy to be here. And
good.
I knew I was going to nail it this time.
Okay, good. So what did you think of It?
What did I think of it?
What did you think of it?
I really liked it. It's probably it's one of the adaptations of Stephen King that's really captured what he's all about and what his horror style is. So it has got this great sort of little cadre of characters who are, just fleshed out to engage with and care about as they face this very silly but very intimidating threat that they're now faced with. And you've got all the sort of trademarks of Stephen King's universe in there and his little town of Derry in Maine.
Yes.
I didn't notice an alcoholic writer, although maybe the dad of the chick.
He might have been. He wasn't dressed like a writer, though. He was dressed more like a mechanic.
I don't know. Yeah. Yes, you're right. He had overalls that didn't look like writer's overalls.
Exactly. Maybe he had a novel tucked away somewhere, though, that he wasn't telling his daughter about. You never know. I know what you mean about all those King-like elements, because it's partly a sort of coming-of-age story as well, and
yeah.
One of the things you notice if you watch a lot of these Stephen King adaptations or you read the books is that bullying is a major factor in them, and that's definitely here strongly.
And the bullies are fucking crazy. They're not just bullies. They're not just going to pick on you and be like, nice tie, bozo. That's the kind of thing I used to get. But no, they're lunatics. They're dangerous psychopaths.
They are, yeah. They're not just name-calling, they're writing their names on fat people's tummies with knives.
Yes, and I think it got left out of the film. It is in the book that the bullies have like a refrigerator where they like to keep the bodies of animals that they've tortured.
Wow.
Holy shit.
That's pretty extreme. That's beyond bullying, really, isn't it? That's just psychotic behaviour.
It's troublesome to think of like Nelson Muntz having something like that hidden away somewhere.
It's a funny thing, though, isn't it? Because a lot of Stephen King's stories do have that, and it's portrayed as bullying, but it's much darker than that.
Yeah, it's proper police territory.
Yeah.
If any one of the things that happen in a Stephen King novel happened to you, you'd want some authorities involved.
Yeah. I wonder what happened to him when he was a child. He must have been bullied for that to constantly get turned up again and again and again.
Yeah, I think so. He's not very subtle when it comes to hiding, the things that he's annoyed about in his work, which is why most Christian characters in a Stephen King book also psychos who will happily murder children if it gets them closer to God.
Exactly, yeah. As we were saying, that this movie, it balances this sort of coming of age story with all of these kids, and they're quite sort of hormonal and all that sort of stuff, and it's also a horror movie. Do you think it balances those elements well, or how do you think that worked?
I think so. I think it was probably leaning more towards the horror elements, like almost every scene. I feel like when I revisit it, which I am inclined to do, when I revisit it, it's very much going to be a case of, oh, okay, now it's this horror set piece. Now it's this one. And the moments in between of the kids bonding do come quite naturally through responses to the threats they have experienced.
Yeah.
One of the bonding montages is of all the boys getting together to clean a bloody bathroom after Pennywise has made this blood spray out of it, much like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And it's, just them getting together and cooperating to clean all the horrific blood out of this girl's bathroom.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah, it was more... Whereas Stand By Me was definitely, more of a coming of age story with a couple of horror elements, this body thrown in. This was definitely a horror movie that happened to focus around some kids who were growing up. But yeah,
I think the horror elements sort of they gradually seep into the story and they get sort of stronger and stronger as the thing goes along. I've got to be honest, I almost preferred the plain coming of age sort of elements.
Yeah.
Although I know what you mean. The whole kind of thrust of the story is that there are these kids who've got real problems, things they're afraid of in their real lives.
Yeah.
And then Pennywise is like the sort of manifestation of those. The girl who's called Bev we're led to believe is being abused by her father.
Yes.
There's another kid who I thought was absolutely hilarious called, I think his name's Eddie.
Oh God, the names in this thing, I can't even... all the kids are just named... There's a Ben and a Bill.
Yes.
Fucking hell, Stephen King, why do this to us? There's Ben, Bill, Eddie, Richie. Could you throw in a Kumar or a Tarquin or something just to make them a bit more memorable?
Exactly, yeah. Bertram and I don't know. Come up with any other strange names.
What's so British?
Tristram.
Tristram,
Yeah.
come and see this crazy clown fellow.
I know what you mean. Yeah, we probably both cheated, didn't we? I had to look all the names up ahead of this podcast. Yeah,
I think the funny one is called Eddie.
Eddie, yeah, and there's one who's obsessed by sex called Richie, and everything he says is related to sex or his penis or
pretty filthy stuff as well. I was quite surprised.
Yeah, but it rings true. I think
it does.
The kid who's about 13, but he wants to convince everyone that he's a sort of rampant sex maniac.
Yeah.
Which clearly he isn't. He's sort of prepubescent. But the idea is that Pennywise is sort of the physical manifestation of their fears, and by overcoming their fears, they're then in their lives generally they're able to overcome him at the end of the movie. So it is kind of joined together.
Absolutely. I've seen some people say, "Oh, his one weakness is physical trauma," but because they do basically just beat him up in the end. But it is about sort of overcoming the fear. But the only thing about that confused me is, what about Georgie? Because Georgie at the very beginning was not afraid of Pennywise. He was even reaching in to grab a balloon, and Pennywise just bit his arm off.
He liked Pennywise.
And it's like, it's like, oh, that's a pretty good way of spreading fear. You don't have to be too creative. You can just bite someone's arm all the way off.
Exactly, yeah. So he can bite someone's arm off to then create the fear, but then he's allowed to kill him. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that.
Ah, well, that's an issue with the source material, because I'm pretty sure it goes down much the same way. The TV miniseries is obviously limited in terms of what it could portray, I think.
Yeah.
No kid getting his arm all bitten off.
I'll tell you one thing I did... sorry, my friend, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say it's worth saying that this is a 15 certificate, which I imagine translates to a R rating in the States, or PG-13 at the very least, and it's they get away with quite a bit.
I mean, the only major violence I can think of, you may correct me on this, is the Georgie getting his arm torn off at the beginning.
Yeah, I believe so, but there's some grisly stuff, like the leper, who sort of chases after... I think it's the one who's afraid of germs. Eddie. That is Eddie, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty hardcore.
Yeah. I tell you, I liked all of the 80s references. Like the girl Bev, she does look like Molly Ringwald. And there's a line in there when he says something like, who invited Molly Ringwald into the group or something. And
yes.
There's the chubby kid who's obsessed by a New Kid on the Block. There was a nice running joke, which I'm assuming is not in the source material.
No, I assume not, because I think actually in the source material the modern day stuff was like 1986, and the stuff in the past was like in the 50s, which is King's sort of preferred time to be writing things. Yeah. But
I guess 80s is all the rage now, and you've got kids being bullied and riding around on bikes and talking on walkie-talkies. All that stuff's very popular. You got something like Stranger Things, which is very much influenced by Stephen King, and then this is kind of rebounded and...
Yes, it's that weird circular influence thing where, Stranger Things drew influence from King, and now... Did I say Stranger Kings?
Stranger Kings, yeah.
Kings.
Stephen Thing and Stranger Thing.
Yeah. Stephen Thing was definitely an influence, and now Stranger Things is influencing it. It's
influencing it, yeah.
Yeah, because there's an actor in common, I believe.
Yes, that is correct. And his name is Finn Wolfhard, which is one of the
Wow.
greatest actor names I've ever heard of. He's this scrawny little kid, but he sounds like a Viking.
Don't mess with that kid.
Yeah, my name's Finn Wolfhard. Oh my god! And then you see this little kid with glasses. Okay. Did you find this scary at all?
Here's an interesting thing. I find Stephen King's horror to be quite silly. I also have done. The things that are scary in Stephen King books are cars that have a life of their own.
Yes.
Or, what was the other example I always give?
Like that Disney movie, the Pixar movie. That was quite scary.
That was terrifying. I can't watch that.
Yeah.
Or a Cujo, the story of a killer dog. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Killer dog. That's going to be a Doberman. Or, an Alsatian or something. It's a St. Bernard.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But you wouldn't see that coming.
You wouldn't.
That's what makes it scary.
That's the thing.
You think it's going to help you. You think it's going to come with a little bottle of booze around its neck, but actually it just rips your face off.
That's the thing. It's sneaky.
Yeah.
And I think there was a point in this film where early on, one of the boys is hiding in the basement of the library. He followed something down, and then a pair of feet start coming down the stairs, and it's kind of intimidating, and it keeps coming. Yeah. And it's like, oh God, we can't see its face. I bet it's going to have a messed up face like the woman from the painting in the previous shot.
Yeah.
And it comes down, it hasn't got a head, and I laughed. It was a creepy image because it was jerking around and moving in that Mama style way that things move in this director's films. But
Yes.
I did laugh, and at that stage I became more entertained than scared by the horror.
Yeah.
And in particular, I'm going to embarrass myself. Is it Bill Skarsgård?
That's what I've got, yes.
Excellent. Bill Skarsgård's performance as Pennywise is fucking fascinating. It's magnetic in the same way that sort of Heath Ledger's Joker was, in terms of it's so unpredictable, his little ticks and things that he's doing, that I just became enthralled by it. So I wasn't so much scared every time he came up as like, oh good, I wonder what he'll do. A weird dance whilst his head stays still. Perfect.
Yeah. Have you seen the television version of it?
I have seen the television version of it. I think that is also quite silly because the horror does derive from things like balloons. But when you're a kid, it's the scariest thing because Tim Curry's Pennywise is so frightening.
Yeah.
And so even though this is, PG-13 or possibly R-15 certificate, I really hope lots of kids go see this because I think it's perfect for them. This is a perfect sort of introduction to horror tropes. And I think it will really mess some kids up like the original did.
Yeah, because I'm very much the right age that when the original television version came out, I watched it with my friends. It was a sneaky thing that we watched and we all talked about. And maybe this thing will do exactly the same.
Yeah.
I couldn't get Tim Curry out of my head though while I was watching it, I must say.
Yeah. Well, you can't help but think of his performance, and I think there are some nods here and there to it, as well as some very odd nods to other things that he sort of throws in, like barking like a dog at one stage in order to reference a short story Stephen King had written called The Sunspot Dog or something like that. Yeah, there's some very interesting ticks in that performance, but more than anything, I just found it. And that's something I'd like to have seen more of, is him just talking with the kids and teasing them. My favourite scene probably is him just luring Georgie in, because he's so weird.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Because actually, I think the horror comes from the performance and the creepiness. And while I was watching it, although I did enjoy it very much, I was thinking to myself that the special effects are a bit overcooked, or they're almost unnecessary. The character himself and the performance is creepy without all of these slightly overcooked, jerky kind of visual effects.
Yeah, that's always been his style. If you watch the short film Mama, which is a great short horror film, but it is. I think the monster is. There is an actual actor in there, and I remember there were videos online after the feature film came out saying, "Do you think that Mama was a CGI creation? You're wrong. Look, it was all this guy wearing a mask." And it's like, the fact that there had to be a video pointing that out isn't great.
Yeah, exactly. So they've taken a very natural performance and made it appear fake.
Exactly, that's the thing. And I think an awful lot of what Pennywise did is real, but did at times get overshadowed by the very stagey special effects.
Yes, yeah. I totally agree with that. So what was your favourite scary moment or scene in this movie? Was there one moment or scene that stood out for you?
Yeah, there were two moments that really actually genuinely did put the chills up me. One of them was when he's flipping through a book. Sorry, the larger kid.
Oh, hang on now. Let me get
Cyprian.
this right. I've written Felipe.
Felipe.
What's his
The
name?
kid who loves New Kids on the Block. He is
Ben.
Ben, there we go. Ben is in the library and he's looking through books about terrible things that have happened in Derry. And one of them is a picture, and it just says a gruesome discovery at the scene of the accident, and it's just a whole bunch of people standing around, and it's not obvious anything creepy in this picture. He turns the page and it's the same picture but zooming in on the corner in the trees, and he keeps turning it and it keeps zooming in and in and in and in, and there's something there. You keep seeing it until eventually it comes into focus, and there is a head up a tree in this picture. And I really, the delivery of it creeped me out, but it really creeped me out, the idea that this photographer might have taken a picture of just a scene and not noticed that there was a head up a tree staring right at him as he took the picture.
Yes.
That was creepy.
Yeah, that is creepy. Yeah.
The other moment was when, I believe it's Eddie, the kid who's a butcher shop boy. Nope, that's not Eddie.
No, that's not Eddie. Eddie's the health nut kid. Let me get this. I've got it. Mike.
Mike. It's absolutely Mike. Mike is in a back alley hiding from the evil psychotic bullies.
Yes.
And a bunch of charred hands come through a door, creeping him out. Charred hands are fine, but the charred hands go away and the door opens.
Yes.
And at the end of a poorly lit corridor, behind plastic, you make out Pennywise sort of weirdly gurgling to himself whilst hanging from the ceiling and doing something to a slab of meat. It's really creepy.
What do you think he was doing to the slab of meat?
I wouldn't like to speculate, but I think he was definitely getting all over that meat. In every way you wouldn't want Pennywise to do.
Yes. Oh, that's sick. Sick clown.
Sick clown.
That's sick clown.
Sick Bill Skarsgård.
Oh, that's actually the way he dresses all the time. He was typecast.
They had to dial him down for the...
Exactly, yeah. That's what the special effects for. They were actually to cover up what he was really doing.
Which was unfilmable.
Exactly. They had to save this movie in post with all those special effects. I agree with all of that. Yeah, for me, actually, and it's right at the beginning of the movie. We've already talked about it. And I think I was just softened or lulled into a false sense of security having watched the original, which is not as horrific. And it is Georgie at the beginning going into the storm drain. And I definitely remember Tim Curry, doing "They all float down here," and I was expecting it to sort of cut away, but then to see the little kid who's very cute and everything get his arm torn off and then get sucked into the storm drain. That was the only moment in the movie that made me, jump back in my seat. I thought that was very effective.
It's a hell of an opening.
It is a hell of an opening, yeah. And I like the bit as well where the Molly Ringwald lookalike character, who we're going to call Beverly, because that's her name.
That's a good thing to call her.
Yeah. She should have a name like Tim, just so she fits in with all the boys. Beverly, she's leaning over the sink and all these tentacles come out and grab her, and then this gouts of blood kind of shoot out. Now, it's not that I found it creepy exactly. But when it's all over and she's kind of sitting on the floor in the bathroom and blood's all over the walls, and her dad comes in, and I was thinking that we would immediately get the cut and you'd look around and the room's clean.
Yes.
But it isn't. It's still covered in blood, and I've not seen that done before, and I thought that was a really nice sort of spin on a classic trope where what you think you've seen, you haven't seen.
Yeah.
But actually when he walks into the room, he can't see it, but it's still there. We can see it.
Yeah, and it just stays there. The boys have to come in and clean it away because it just stays there. And I think that plays into this idea that there's some sort of spell on the adults where they can't see anything Pennywise related, but it is genuinely there, which is very creepy. It's not just, it's gotten inside of her head. There is actual blood everywhere, but the parents can't see any bad stuff in this town, which is also why nobody stopped to help the chubby kid when he was... having, initials carved into his stomach.
Yeah. And there's a line in there somewhere. We're talking about the sort of coming of age stuff where the sort of sex obsessed kid called Richie. There's something that he can't see, and his line is, "What is it? Can only virgins see this?"
Yes.
That's cool. Okay.
Which might even be a fun reference to a very unfun moment of the book, where the reason that the adults are able to see and recognize Pennywise is because when they were kids, they all had sex in a tunnel.
Right.
It's very weird. It's a very weird moment in this book, and it's not made it into the miniseries or this film. But yeah, there's a bit where they can't get out of the tunnel, and so in order to calm everybody down, Beverly has sex with all of the boys. But it's keen to point out she only orgasmed with Bill and Ben.
The Flower Pot Men.
The Flower Pot Men, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, okay, that's
very
intriguing.
Weird.
That's very dark. So actually, that leads me to another question. Since you've read the book, and I'm going to come clean, I haven't read it. I've seen the old miniseries, but does this thing hew pretty closely to the source material?
You know what? I cannot remember if it structures it the same way, because obviously the miniseries I saw a lot. The book I've only read the once, but the miniseries intertwines the two narratives of them as adults and them as kids. I can't remember if the book does that or if there's like a part 1 and part 2.
I'm pretty sure it's part 1 and part 2, and I only know that from reading about it, not actually reading it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty close. There are different scares, obviously, but there's a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of Stephen King's patented weird stuff that tends to put me off. Has been cut, like, oh, Pennywise is actually a giant evil spider and his greatest nemesis is a turtle. And it's like, okay, I'm going to stop reading this now.
I was waiting for him to turn into a spider, actually, because that I remember that from the miniseries, but I think that was from when they were adults, and I was sitting through the movie waiting for there to be a kind of let's go forward 27 years.
Yeah.
And it never comes.
Yeah, except in the original miniseries, I think the clown is scarier than the spider. So, yeah, I guess we'll see how faithful they stay in Chapter 2. We're going to have to wait a while, though, because I think people are saying 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that leads me to my next question, actually. Having watched this, did it leave you wanting to see more?
Yeah, I'm very curious. I want to see... I mean, it's kind of a shame that we're kind of done with these kids. Because I really did like the kids, and I just really hope that the actors who play them as adults, are able to capture that same sort of spirit of the character, because that's going to be one of my main investment points. But more than anything, I just want to see more Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, and we'll definitely get that. So, yeah, I'm very up for it. And is he going to ramp it up for the adults? Oh god, there's a lot of dark stuff and iconic stuff still to come. So yeah, I'm very excited for it, Chapter 2.
Yes, I am as well. I was slightly, coming into this sort of ignorant, I was expecting that the film would deal with the entire novel and then they would just make some crap up to, make another movie. And now I realise that actually it's first half of the book has been made into one movie, second half of the book is going to be made into another. But in the in-depth research I did by typing it into a Google search, I found out that what they're going to do is they're going to change the source material a bit so that it will have a flashback structure. So you will still you'll have the adults, but they'll also go back to the kids as well.
Okay, sort of maybe cover the stuff that happens after Pennywise.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how they're going to do it, but apparently it is going to still include the kids, but it will also focus on them when they're older.
I mean, that is something. It's very exciting, the idea of a horror sequel that was intended. Yes. Because, we've all seen like Insidious Part 2 and The Conjuring Part 2, where it carries on the story, but it's exciting, this idea that they knew they were going to do this. And so they've put in primers and little things that hint. Like, apparently the order with which they leave the circle at the end corresponds to the order in which some of them are going to die in, which is very, very interesting. And it's just the little bits of foreboding they've put in.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, spoiler alert. Yeah, it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. How do you think this stacked up against other Stephen King adaptations? Because we've alluded to, there's been a lot of them, and some of them are prestigious and some of them aren't.
No, there have been so many Stephen King adaptations, and in so many different genres. Usually, the Stephen King things I really like are the ones where the directors came in and made it their own. This director definitely did, because there's some very Mama-esque scares in this, but this feels like the purest version of Stephen King's view of horror. Like, this is what Stephen King considers to be scary, and it hasn't been like changed to be scary to a modern audience. This is it. This is what freaks him out, and that's
it. Is it?
It is it. Yeah, and there's an authenticity to that. There's a purity to it. It might not be the same thing I find scary, but it feels very faithful in that way.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. It's not perhaps as artistically as ambitious as some of the adaptations, and that's right. You're talking about then visionary directors making the work their own. This is a faithful, stylish, very solid interpretation of the material. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick rundown of our top Stephen King adaptations. Paul and I are going to do a top 5 each. Paul, we'll start with you. What's your number 5 favourite Stephen King adaptation?
My number 5 favourite Stephen King adaptation is also one of the silliest ones, if you discount, but also good, so not like Maximum Overdrive. Creepshow, the collaboration between Stephen King and the late great George A. Romero. Yeah, it's a fabulous anthology film, structured and sort of stylized like a comic book, with appropriate cinematography, telling creepy little stories from the imagination of Stephen King. Also happens to star Stephen King in one of the stories as a redneck who discovers an asteroid and an alien life, which is good entertainment.
Oh, great. Was it based on a series of stories, or did he write them originally for the film, do you know?
Oh, I do believe it is an original screenplay by Stephen King.
Excellent. Okay. I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen that, so that's one I'm going to cap.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned the name George A. Romero, so I'm going to be there.
I think the highlight is, I can't remember if it's called this, but it's the one involving the crate. I think it might be called The Crate. There's also a brilliant Leslie Nielsen performance in a menacing role. He plays a villain.
Does he trip over a lot and sort of hit himself in the face with doors and things?
Yeah, Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So two of the funniest men. Two of the funniest actors in this terrible piece of horror.
I mean, the tagline to the movie is, "You'll never have so much fun being scared," and I think that's appropriate. Okay,
fine. My number 5 is also rather silly, actually. It's Christine, and another prestigious horror director, John Carpenter. I think it's the best movie ever made about a haunted classic car. And the note I've written to myself is Bad Knight Rider.
Yes.
It's just about a guy, a kid basically is a nerd at school who purchases a broken down kind of classic car from the 1950s, does it up, and somehow it ends up killing everybody. It's an absurd idea, but it's incredibly stylish. In fact, it might even be John Carpenter's best looking movie. That's what I was thinking about while I watched it.
It was beautifully put together. It looks really cool.
I wouldn't say it's scary, but it's fun.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, cool. And what would your number 4 be?
Number 4, I am actually going to put in It, 2017.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel it slides in quite neatly there. It's just, one of the more entertaining films based on his work.
Yep, I think it deserves its place on the list, that's for sure. My 4, and it's another sort of prestigious horror director, it would be The Dead Zone. Yes, which stars Christopher Walken, who is involved in a car accident, is in a coma for a long time, and wakes up with the ability to predict the future. It doesn't have the best plot in the world. It's quite episodic, but ultimately the thrust of the plot is that the president, or rather a senator who's going to ultimately will become the president, played by Martin Sheen, is going to destroy the world, rather like Donald Trump is at the moment.
It's very prescient.
It is, exactly. And so Christopher Walken decides to shoot him. So Christopher Walken, if you're listening to this podcast...
you know what you've got to do.
One of the odd things about this is that somehow the Martin Sheen character has the missile codes on speed dial in his house. He doesn't have to go into a war room. He's just got this sort of pine lodge somewhere, and he can press a button and blow up the world. I hope Donald Trump doesn't have the same facilities.
Yes.
What would be your number 3?
My number 3 is Stand By Me. Directed by Rob Reiner, with a whole sort of coterie of young talent in there, some of which transferred into adult talent, some of which did not. Mr. Feldman. And Mr. Phoenix, unfortunately. Yeah, it's about four young boys who live in a small town where there's not much to do, and so when one of them believes that they know where they can find a dead body, they undertake a pilgrimage to go look at it. Meanwhile, Jack Bauer is after them in the weirdest episode of 24 yet.
24 hours to stop them.
And he's willing to torture anyone.
In the Stephen King manner.
Yes, I think playing a bully in the Stephen King universe is a good backing for someone who will eventually play this sort of badass CIA agent who's willing to use torture as an interrogation technique. It's a really great movie with a lot of sentiment and emotion behind it, and it's just a great coming-of-age story.
And it's got Richard Dreyfuss, isn't it, as one of the older characters? Yeah,
as the narrator, yeah. Yes, and he also shows up in the film.
And there's a very sad ending where they all part ways, and they say, for a while we said hello in the corridor, and then we nodded to each other, and then we just stopped talking to each other and drifted our separate ways, which is very true to life.
Yeah, and the final line in it is something like, "I never had kids like I never had kids. I never had kids like the ones I had when I was 13." Jesus Christ! I never had friends like the ones I had when I was 13 or something like that. And Christ, does anyone? And it's just this sad idea that childhood is a lost country that you can't go back to.
My number 3 might surprise some people. It's The Running Man, which I was interested to discover is directed by Paul Michael Glaser, or Starsky from Starsky and Hutch.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I didn't know that until I looked it up. Written by the great Stephen E. D'Souza, one of the great sort of action screenwriters of all time. And it's got Arnold Schwarzenegger, as we all know, I'm sure we've all seen the movie, but he's put into a deadly game show where he's basically hunted live on air. And he gets to say lines like, "Hey, Lighthead, hey, Christmas tree," as he kills a man who's, dressed in all kinds of electrical apparatus. It was the novel it's based on actually was written by King, writing as Richard Bachman.
Yes.
His
disguise persona for a few years.
Exactly. And I doubt he wrote those lines. I suspect they were written specifically for the movie.
No, the book was very different, a much more sort of gritty dystopia about a man desperate to try and get money for his kid's operation, joining in a deadly reality TV show thing, like the Hunger Games.
Very different. Okay.
Yeah, very.
Exactly. But it's a very entertaining movie. Lots of great action. Arnold Schwarzenegger at the height of his powers.
Yes.
It's a guilty pleasure, one that you could watch again and again.
Absolutely.
What's your number 2, Paul?
My number 2 is The Green Mile. Frank Darabont's second of 3 adaptations of Stephen King's works.
Yes.
And very sort of a very evocative sort of tale of a 1930s, I believe, prison, specifically the death row of this prison, which is managed by Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
They take in a new prisoner, a massive guy called John Coffey, played brilliantly by Michael Clarke Duncan, who seems to have mysterious abilities. He's in prison for having murdered 2 girls.
Yeah.
And it's just, it very much like Shawshank, it's very episodic. There are like these little storylines that go on and sort of unfold, like Percy, the terrible fellow guard who really believes that he's here to punish these men, whereas Tom Hanks is, believes that they're about to pay the ultimate price for their crimes, and this should try and be a peaceful experience for them. But it's also a lot of this sort of deeply unpleasant kind of idea of just being in this place and waiting for your day to be killed. It's a real horrific idea, and the idea that they're going to put to death this man who, as the film goes on, you learn is more and more extraordinary. So a lot of melancholy there, and I think the ending, not to give anything away, but it's one of the creepiest things that King ever achieved, is the notion of what the character is experiencing at the end. I really like The Green Mile.
Yes, me too. It's one I should probably go back and watch again, actually. My number 2 is Misery, which is another Rob Reiner movie, actually.
Lovely.
I think it's almost a perfect movie. It's virtually a two-hander between Kathy Bates and James Caan, and he's a very famous writer. He's had a crash in a snowstorm. She rescues him, and she rescues him because actually she was stalking him. Takes him home, looks after him, but is she looking after him or is he really being imprisoned? and forces him to write a new novel in the Misery franchise because he killed off Misery in the most recent book. And I think the movie really rests on Kathy Bates' performance because she is terrifying.
Fuck.
Yeah, she's really scary. Having said that, I think the most frightening part of the film is where she says, "I'm so happy I'm going to play all of my Liberace records." That terrified me, the notion of being forced to listen to all those Liberace records. But she says things like, you cock-a-doodie, and she won't swear. She's a religious fanatic.
Of course,
it's a classic King trope. Yeah. And there's the classic scene where she smashes his legs in with a hammer because she doesn't want him to escape.
Yeah, horrifying.
And truly tense from beginning to end.
Definitely. I just wanted to highlight a couple of the other sort of supporting players. Lauren Bacall, the sort of gorgeous screen beauty and incredibly charismatic actress, plays his James Caan's agent, which really surprised me when I learned that, sort of having learnt who Lauren Bacall was.
His aging agent.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I really like the sheriff. The one,
Richard Farnsworth.
Yes, the guy who's sort of looking for the writer and believes something is up. He very much feels like a sort of prototype Sheriff Tom Bell from No Country, who is one of my favourite characters ever. So, yeah, I really like him in it.
Yeah, he's another actor who seemed to be born old.
Yes.
Because The Straight Story was a long time after this was made, but he already looks about 80.
God, yes, it was about 10 years difference there, but there's nothing has happened in between.
Nothing's happened, yeah. Yeah, he's brilliant, isn't he?
He is.
What was your number one?
My number one favourite Stephen King adaptation is the one that Stephen King likes the least, and that is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always been the scariest film I've ever seen and one of my favourite films. It was denied to me for a number of years when I was a kid until it was finally sort of taken down from its top shelf and presented to me and like, okay, I think you're old enough for this now. I was 12. And it was just terrifying, especially just the atmosphere of the thing, Jack Nicholson's performance, which of course does go over the top a lot, but some of the quieter moments, the moments where he's just really bitchy with his family, like Shelley Duvall comes in and says, they say it's going to snow later, just trying to make conversation, and he just says, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah.
I just found that really relatably unpleasant and scary, and just this idea that this member of your family is slipping away and becoming more and more dangerous. I found a lot scarier than, haunted hedge maze monsters.
Yeah. Jack Nicholson is completely demented in this film, isn't he?
God, he's he's full on. It's just, I mean, you've heard of method actors, but Stanley Kubrick was really a method director.
Yeah.
If he wanted a character to act crazy, he'd sort of put them in extreme situations, like asking him to cut down a door 70 times in a row, or if he needed a character to be exhausted, he'd shoot her for 2 days in a row. He'd get there. He'd get there in the end.
Have you ever seen the making of this?
Yes, Stanley Kubrick's daughter, Vivian Kubrick, made a really cool sort of... It's just half an hour long, and it's just a little bit of insight into it. And it's something cute happens. Somebody's mum comes to the set. I can't remember if it's I think it's Stanley Kubrick's mum.
Yeah.
Comes on set, and it's just... it's quite sweet, but there's little insights into the horror, like when...
She wasn't naked in the bathroom or anything, was she?
No, I don't think she was naked in the bathroom. Although... Interestingly, the young naked woman in room 237 was just an extra. They were speaking to people in the ball sequence.
Right.
Yeah, when the room is full, and they just found someone who was like, "Hey, would you be willing to
get naked?
Get naked for us?" Yeah.
And hug Jack Nicholson.
Yes, which makes that scene even more erotic until it all goes wrong.
It does.
And becomes one of the genuinely most upsetting things I've ever seen in my entire life.
Exactly. Yeah, there are a lot of people out there who are very quick on the pause button with that scene.
You have to be very quick.
It all goes... It starts off so great, and then it goes so wrong so quickly.
Poor Jack.
Poor Jack. I like the making of that, because you see him like jumping up and down, getting himself all worked up before the scenes.
Yes, he's swinging his axe around, and a stagehand has to like duck to avoid getting hit.
Yeah, but then Kubrick's quite abusive to Shelley Duvall, isn't he? Or not abusive exactly, but he's quite abrasive towards her. He doesn't appear to like her very much.
Yeah, he had a lot of problems with her acting method and her style of acting, and I think she gives an extraordinary performance in The Shining. Like, she's just so fragile at the beginning, and yet becomes this sort of bolder and bolder figure as the thing goes on. Sort of more as she's more capable of standing up to Jack and finally takes action. It's a hell of a thing to watch. I actually recently watched it in IMAX. It was shown at the BFI IMAX, and I saw it, huge on this massive screen, one of the largest in Europe.
Yeah.
And Shelley Duvall's face, just, the landscape of her face, it's just this pretty extraordinary thing to watch. It's just this incredibly haunted-looking woman.
He's about 50 foot tall, towering.
It is, yeah. 50 foot tall, Jack Nicholson looming at you. It was a hell of a experience.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Great. Now my number one, which I'm sure you would have chosen if I hadn't chosen it, it would have been on your list somewhere, would be Carrie, which is made by Brian De Palma. I think the thing I like about this movie, one, it's incredibly stylish. It's very, very well made. I like the idea of this girl who has got all of this sort of pent up sexual frustration and is caught up in all of that with all these other girls who are bullying her. And there's that classic scene at the beginning where she has her first period, which you probably wouldn't. I don't think they'd be allowed to film it that way now. And I like the idea that she goes through this kind of personal journey where towards the end of the movie, it's as if has this kind of apotheosis where she's been bullied, but she's been invited to prom. She's become the prom queen, albeit that experience has been manufactured. And it's filmed in such a way that you realize how amazing this is. And it's the most important moment of her life. And the applause is all in slow motion and everyone's smiling. And people are genuinely happy for her. They're not in on what's going to happen to her. And then the bucket of blood drops on her head and it just turns into this blood, this just bloodbath carnage. Everyone gets burnt and killed. And it's incredibly powerful. Sissy Spacek is great in this movie. One of the slight issues I have with it is that she's actually really quite attractive even from the beginning of the film. Yeah. It was a bit of a sort of Ugly Betty situation where they've taken someone who's quite good looking and just given them a slightly dowdy dress and not given them a hairdo, and then you're expected to accept that they're, everyone's the object of everyone's bullying.
Yes, they usually do that. I think it's probably, I guess, a kind of thing to do. Like, I'm thinking of Excision recently. I say recently, it was about 5 years ago, where they got an actor from Beverly Hills 90210, I think.
Right.
And that does do a really great job of sort of making her look homely. I guess that's nicer than hiring someone who looks homely and then making a movie about how homely she looks. But, no, I agree. Sissy Spacek is very attractive, but I think it's probably slightly more plausible than Chloe Grace Moretz in the...
I haven't seen it.
In the remake. Right, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm not intending to watch it.
That's fair enough, but the idea of Chloe Grace Moretz being anybody's sort of social outcast is a little bit implausible.
I should imagine that would be a candidate for One Good Thing.
Oh, could be.
I tell you, the creepiest moment in this for me, though, is when Nancy Allen, who is Brian De Palma's wife, RoboCop's girlfriend, there's a bit where she's performing fellatio on John Travolta, but yet she's able to speak completely clearly. And I was thinking, is she a ventriloquist? How is she able to do that?
She's pretending. She's down there with like a cantaloupe that's been cut in half and just... Travolta's not checking, so it's all fine.
I don't know, he seems to be enjoying himself while having a conversation. It doesn't occur to him that it's strange that she's able to do that. There you go. So that's almost it. Paul, why don't you tell us a little about your podcast, One Good Thing?
One Good Thing, we believe that no film is truly worthless. And so we watch the films that everyone else has given up on, all the worst sort of things, and try to find redeeming qualities in there. Because reason is why. Why not? Answer me that.
Exactly. Well, you get some laughs out of it. I would say that the podcasts are often more amusing than the actual films that you're talking about.
Thank you very much.
True.
It's probably certainly more fun to make than some of the films that we cover. But yeah, we've found good things in Paul Blart, More Blart 2. I genuinely cannot bring myself to say the name correctly now. It's been too long. I can't even say it right.
No. Yes.
Lesbian Vampire Killers. Oh, just what else have we done? Grown Ups 2 by the time you hear this, I believe.
Yeah, the only thing good about Lesbian Vampire Killers is the title, surely.
Yes, it's a snakes on a plane situation where the title far exceeds the quality of the film they're in. But yeah, we've watched all these films and we found good things, and we continue with the challenge and hope that one day we will find a film that is truly worthless and therefore render our existence obsolete.
If that happens, will you stop recording the podcast? It's just, we're beaten. That's it.
We're going to have to talk about it. I mean, it nearly happened with Grown Ups 2. We had to have some serious talks about whether or not we could swing this round. When we get to the really dangerous stuff, like Goodman's absolutely determined to do an anti-vax documentary.
Right.
When we get to the stuff that is just pure evil, I really don't know what we're going to do.
Just rename the podcast No Good Things.
No Good Things.
Great. And as the film critic for Screen Mayhem, you're going to be reporting from the London Film Festival, which we're all very happy about. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The London Film Festival's been going for... it's hard to pinpoint an exact date on it because it used to exist as various different things.
Right.
But it's at the very least been continuing in its current form since the early 2000s, but really it goes back decades. And it's just... It's the most one of the most prestigious film events, I think, and it's this fantastic festival where they just show films from... this year, next year, all sorts of things sort of get debuted there. Interesting sort of original features, first features by new directors, and exciting new films from old directors, and art house films, and films that maybe won't get much of a general release later on. Fantastic sort of foreign films.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a really great insight into the future of film, and every year I go there and it just gets me excited about cinema again.
Brilliant. And we look forward to all of the lovely articles and reviews that you're going to be sending our way.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So if you enjoyed our podcast, then why not check out the rest of our content on screenmayhem.com, which also includes podcasts on action cinema, classic cinema, TV, and a variety of written reviews and articles. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Goodbye. Until next time.